Good morning, everybody. Dave Neal here, host of the Rush Hour podcast on this Thursday morning, March 20th, 2025. My final episode here from my mobile studio in Los Angeles, California. And it's a special episode. It's a special long one for you, an interview with Taylor Lorenz. So she wrote this article a week ago called Lively vs. Baldoni, How Right-Wing Influencers Are Weaponizing the Fight to Take Down MeToo. Now, I agreed with some of it that people will take cultural issues and make it fit their agenda and all of that. But there was a segment where she shared my thumbnail, my YouTube artwork without crediting me. And I kind of put her on blast friendly on Twitter. And it led to this little spat. And she's like, I'd love to talk if you want to talk it out. And I said, absolutely. So we met up in Silver Lake, which is an area, a lovely part of Los Angeles. And we did a walk around the Silver Lake Reservoir. And it's a very, very good quality GoPro video you're about to watch or listen to. And we had a very nuanced conversation. People will get upset. People will be upset. You're talking to somebody who's conflating these issues and whatnot. I prefer conversation with people, and especially when it's with good faith. And I believe Taylor Lorenz has good faith. In fact, I'd probably consider a friend after this conversation. Doesn't mean we agree on everything. I love to live in a world where you can disagree on some things. We agree on a lot, though. And I think she did a better job in conversation kind of prosecuting her point. But that's what happens with, titles and clickbait and things like that. It happens on my channel. It happens in the written word. It happens on Twitter, which is, there's usually a more nuanced conversation. She's going to argue that she thinks these right-wing creators are using this story as a pipeline to jam their ideas down people's throats. And I'm going to argue that I think conversation is good, and I'll share my thoughts and opinions based on these pop culture stories, and audiences can use their critical thinking skills to see what works for them. That's my belief, which might be a little naive, but I think you got to throw it all out there. And she doesn't disagree with that. So you're going to enjoy this conversation. And maybe you won't. Maybe it's frustrating to hear her share. She's traditionally on different sides of the story than I am, whether it be Johnny Depp v. Amber Heard, or even her wanting to believe Blake and, let it all play out in court. Well, we can have these conversations. And I think what you're going to watch right now is the proof in the pudding that you can have a conversation with someone you may otherwise disagree with. And this is a hell of a lot more interesting than just dunking on each other online. My opinion, more of this, less of that. Let me know what you guys think. Here it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rush Hour podcast with Dave Neal. Very excited for today's guest. She has written for the New York Times, Washington Post. Now I believe is an independent journalist. It's Taylor Lorenz. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Good.
Wow, are we besties already? Like, what are we doing? I want to start with a hard-hitting question, okay? Let's cross right here. Oh, he's parking. Sorry. Okay. We're live in the streets of Los Angeles. First question, how can you consider yourself a journalist if you don't drink coffee?
I know, it's a sickness. I used to drink too much coffee, and now I'm in coffee rehab.
So what do you do for happiness?
I'm no caffeine. I do a green tea sometimes.
Oh yeah, that's like if you're having a fun night, you do a little green tea?
Yeah, if I'm I really need to pick me up. But I was drinking 2 venti black coffees every morning, and that was too much.
That'll do it. With the anxiety or just like jitters?
I wasn't sleeping. I was up all night long, and it was making me, it was crazy.
Now, that's probably actually ties into the internet addiction that we all struggle with. Is there are you finding yourself up at night beefing with people?
Yeah.
Or is that what was happening?
No, the internet is for beefing.
Because we met at 1 a.m. last night.
I know, and I was like, oh my God, he's up. I am up so late all the time. Also because it's I don't know, I don't have a set schedule now, so I used to have to be on a daily 8 a.m. Zoom call.
Yeah, that'll keep you honest.
And so now that I don't, I'm I can sleep in a little bit.
I record my morning podcast at night.
That's
so
smart.
that way I can sleep in a little bit. So I have it done because not much news changes.
Yeah,
I should
do that. But so I'm just up. And I think the internet, you can beef with people at all hours. It's the beauty of online.
Yeah, well, so I want to talk about your article, but not, I think there's more important things that we can talk about. So I don't want to keep it too long, but let's start. Give me the quick thesis statement of your article you just wrote.
Oh my God, very controversial. People were mad at me for this one. So I wrote an article. I noticed a while ago, I have a lot of friends that are addicted to celebrity gossip, as we all are. And they were telling me, you have to watch Candace Owens. Candace Owens is genius. She's been breaking down Blake Lively, Baldoni stuff. She's amazing, da-da-da-da. Then I started to hear Megyn Kelly, Brett Cooper, just all of these right-wing names. And I would try to say they actually are like right wing. They're not just like celebrity, gossip journalists. Like you're sort of getting sucked into this pipeline.
I mean, Megyn Kelly literally ran a presidential debate, you know? So like, yeah, she brings some form of credibility.
Some form, but she's also a Fox News, like, she's right now, she used to be more of a, she used to be like a journalist at Fox. And then after she left, actually, because of her own kind of problems there, now she's like a commentator. She's a podcaster primarily.
She's also like a martyr of being canceled. Regardless of what you think of, if you're canceled for the right or wrong reasons, she gets a fat settlement from NBC.
Exactly.
And kind of ends up doing her own thing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, so sorry. You're watching
she actually, so I was watching also the CPAC this year, which is the big conservative conference at the Olive. And Megyn Kelly's entire 20-minute speech on stage was about Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. So I was really interested in how the right-wing media was like leveraging this case and why they were suddenly talking about this case. So I reached out to a bunch of them and I was like, hey, why are you guys covering this so much? And I talked to Candace and she was like, well, it's doing insanely well. And this is actually like this huge growth area and it's bringing me all of these new audiences.
Are you friendly? Are you friends with her? Or
no, I cover, for people that don't know, I cover the content creator industry. So I cover online attention and I cover it on the left, I cover it on the right. I'm not really friends with the people I cover, mostly because I write about them and I disagree. Anybody that knows my politics knows I disagree with Candace on almost everything.
True. Yeah.
But I talk to them all the time because I write about, this is my job, right? So you talk to people that you don't agree with. So I talked to her, I talked to Brett Cooper, I talked to just a bunch of right-wing influencers that were like, it's going gangbusters. We can't cover this enough because basically it's a massive pipeline for us. And Brett Cooper, I thought, who's this rising star, she left the Daily Wire. She's a big right-wing podcaster, YouTuber.
Very young too, right?
Yeah, she's like the new Gen Z it girl. She was actually saying how older generations of conservatives, they shunned pop culture. Like Rush Limbaugh, they were like, oh, Hollywood is for freaks and weirdos and it's bad. And this younger generation, like Ben Shapiro's Wicked review going viral or whatever, they actually lean into pop culture, and that's this huge growth vehicle for them. And the way that they're covering Lively versus Baldoni, the reason that they're covering it is because they're very anti-MeToo. They're the anti-MeToo movement.
Would they say this, or is this just based on...
No, they said this.
Gotcha.
Candace Owens said, I want people to see, basically that MeToo, she's been against MeToo from the jump. The series that she's working on that a lot of Baldoni people are now being fed is... the Harvey Weinstein stuff. So there's a very express political goal.
And I think the right likes to generalize everything. So you had the movement that was believe women, and then people literally changed it to believe all women. And that's not what was said, because I feel like when you can work people into like an all or nothing, then you go, well, there's always an excuse. And it's like, of course there's people that will abuse a system or a movement or whatever,
and there's a very tiny fraction of the vast majority of sexual harassment or assault claims, which are totally legitimate. So I wanted to write, and then I reached out to a bunch of I'm like, okay, if this is a expressly political project on the right, what is the left doing to respond? Are they even covering it? Pretty much they're not. And I talked to, and I mean the political influencers, right? Like the people that worked with the DNC. I talked to them and I was like, well, why aren't you guys covering this? They're like, well, it's just celebrity news. It's just celebrity news and gossip. And we don't cover that. And it's like, they didn't see that actually pop culture is a way to essentially grow an audience. And the couple people that were covering it, I thought did a bad job. Phil DeFranco, no hate to Phil, but he kind of didn't really know anything about the case. And he just did this random 2-minute segment where he put this extreme far right influencer up on screen that, again, is pushing people to follow Candace and her Weinstein stuff. And
what if she has the right point?
I would argue that that's not the right.
What you're saying is a co-op. It's endorsing her other beliefs.
Yeah, of course, because you're encouraging people to follow, and you're not contextualizing it. So you're not saying, hey, by the way, there's this right-wing manufactured, effort happening. So pay attention, be aware of this. This is what's happening. There's a lot of bad faith attacks. Like, if you're gonna follow somebody for this coverage, follow XYZ who's doing responsible coverage. Don't just follow, like, don't just see, oh, Candace Owens is posting up to the minute updates, so therefore, you know, I'm just gonna listen to everything she says, which is unfortunately like how it happens. And also,
So she's the marijuana, she's the gateway drug.
she's kind of the gateway. That was like how I framed it. And I think,
Which I don't believe in, but I do understand. I do
I
understand
don't
that
want to
point.
say that, yeah, I don't believe that about like marijuana, but I do think like, here's the thing, we all live in this algorithmically delivered like social media ecosystem. And if you watch one or two Candace videos, or if you watch one or two right-wing videos, you are going to be fed more of that in the feed. And that was the experience of the people that I talked to. They were like, well, I started watching conservative media because they're covering so much of the Baldoni stuff. And now I'm getting all of this other content in the feed, and maybe it's resonating with me.
Well, whoa. Okay, keep going.
Well, what the right would say is like, this just proves that we're right, and like MeToo was a mistake, and that's why it's hitting so hard. And I don't believe that's true. I think that
Are they saying that?
Oh, yeah.
I actually didn't even hear the Me Too like mentioned with relation to this case.
Oh my God, that's the whole point of it. And so it goes back to, so I covered, let me zoom out too. So
Please.
I feel like I'm talking so much, but like I started in 2014 covering Gamergate, which was this coordinated, orchestrated harassment campaign against women in video game world and journalism, and then later Comicsgate against, you know, women in the comic book world. Basically to call out anybody that had claims of sexual harassment, gender-based discrimination, sexual assault. It was to flood the internet with attacks on them and smears on them and sort of discredit anything that they had to say before we could even evaluate the merits of the claims. And again, this is not to say, oh, everybody should be universally believed, and if you have questions about it, you know, you're canceled. No, it's just that there's this preemptive effort to silence women and to intimidate women from coming forward about these things. The right realized that this is a very effective strategy. When Amber Heard stuff happened, that whole defamation case blew up, they basically ran this playbook on her, where it was no longer about really the facts of the case. It was just about creating a nonstop content that would feed into this narrative that all women are sort of to be disbelieved and
Histrionic.
yeah, and terrible and evil and da-da-da.
Do you believe that affected the jury?
I have no idea, honestly.
Just culturally, you saw that.
I think culturally,
Look, I don't
no matter-
disagree that like there'll be instances where everyone goes gangbusters on like Anne Hathaway, and
Right.
and why? Maybe because she's, I don't know, got ADHD and talks a certain way. Like
Yeah.
who knows? But she's like a perfectionist. So I totally understand that point. I just like I got a 10-month-old, right? What do I want to teach him growing up? I can't teach him what content to watch, right? I have to teach them critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have like Gavin Newsom has Charlie Kirk on, and Gavin Newsom says, hey, my teen son loves you. I would hope that my son is able to sift through and critically think what's bullshit and what's triggering your brain in a cultural way. Like, I reject all of Candace Owens, and especially Megyn Kelly's, everything's a cultural war issue.
Yes.
Same thing with like my mom. Everything's meant to scare you and freak you out. And we all know like the trans bathroom debate, it's all like, it's such a minimal, compared to bigger issues that exist out there.
Yes.
It's not like you take the bait on that and then they go, ha, gotcha. And it's like, you sucked me into these, you know, we're not, like, as a progressive, I want to talk about universal health care and things that save lives and all that. And I knew from a mile away that covering this case, well, I'll tell you what, so with Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, I got put on a spreadsheet as like a pro Johnny Depp guy.
Yeah.
Even though I watched the whole case, gave my opinions, and try to figure it out. Like, I wasn't trying to, I don't have any allegiance to anybody. And then that same list had people getting CPS called on them, swatted. So like, I want to know where you come from, because where I come from, one of those types of claims, even being like pro Johnny, is something that I get called all the time. And I was getting railed by the Johnny people that I was too pro Amber, right?
Well, they were going hard. I mean, here's the thing with and I've talked to friends, 'cause I have a lot of friends that are in like the pop culture space, or, you know, they like, or honestly, like tabloid news. I come from tabloid news myself. I worked at the Daily Mail and a bunch of places. And so, and I have huge respect for that style of journalism, actually, even though I know it's problematic in a lot of ways.
If it
like,
bleeds, it leads.
There's something like democratic about the tabloids that I appreciate, but, but, you know, I think that what ends up happening is that a lot of like well-meaning kind of like pop culture commentators, whatever, of course they're going to cover these cases and they're going to come to their own conclusions and they're going to dissect whatever. what they're probably not going to do, because they're not media theorists and it's not really the point of their channel, is to talk about these broader dynamics and be like, hey guys, here's what I think of the case, blah, blah, blah. But just so you know, there's this entire right-wing campaign that's actually seeking to manipulate the internet against Amber in these ways, and here's evidence of that. Again, that doesn't mean that you have to say that these women are without flaws or anything like that, but we do want to be aware of like the dynamics of the internet. Content creators aren't going to do that because they're just covering the case, right? Like they're not going to talk about these bigger media literacy
So you think
issues.
there's like maybe an audience capture, like you want the juice, the gossip, that's what I'm going to give you. I'm not going to go deeper with it.
I just think most people that are going to cover these cases, like such as yourself or others, they're probably not going to do like a bunch of like political media theory about it, because it's not the nature of what they do or cover. And so I feel like a lot of these things, like the way that the right is able to kind of weaponize the internet, it ultimately goes uncovered, and it's sort of, people don't talk about it and people don't realize it. I think people started to realize it by the end of the Amber stuff, but you know, there's people today that are like, she's an evil witch and how dare you, and this just shows that women lie. And like, again, it's just like, you have to understand that the right is intentionally making a, and this is my thing with Blake as well, because like, look, this hasn't even, I don't even think the trial is, you know, like, it's so early days, we barely know. I mean, we know, of course, whatever Justin put out there, but like, that whole case will play out how it plays out. But the point is like, we just need people to zoom out a little bit and just pay attention to their media diet and recognize that if somebody is making nonstop content about how women lie, and that's pretty much all of their content, that's a political choice.
I guess when you talk about the algorithm, you know, maybe what if my content, which does zoom out and talks deeper into politics, what if that's what people get recommended after Candace's? Like, you can't stop her from.
Well, that would be sort of probably an example of like de-radicalizing content. I don't think that happens. Generally, as we know from most algorithms, they're going to lead you further down the rabbit hole.
Well, I agree with you that like those channels are just insane. They're huge.
Right, and what more likely happens is people start watching content that's maybe more general content. That general content, again, is not talking about the broader dynamics of these platforms and the internet. And then they get fed a Candace video, then they get fed whatever, then they start to believe it. And what these right-wing creators will say is like, oh, well, this is evidence that MeToo did go too far, right? And that's what I sort of fundamentally have a problem with. I don't think that is that. I think that what they're doing is they're making these examples of these high-profile women.
Well, and they'll always do that, and then it makes it so that sometimes you don't even want to cover a story. Like, so, just real quick, because I've talked about this ad nauseum, but I covered Bachelor Clayton's paternity scandal. I uncovered a bunch of fraud, and I couldn't get anyone to cover it other than Charlie Kirk. And people told me, don't let him cover it. Don't let my friend Megan Fox cover it, who's super MAGA. And I was like, well, my family's on the line here. I'll let anyone cover it.
But that's the thing. And by the way, of course, because they're covering pop culture. And this is my broader point. Like, my point in that article is not to criticize the few pop culture people on the left that are talking about it, although I do think that I really wish that they would zoom out a little bit more and talk about media. You know, that's why I named a couple of them where like the media literacy is kind of their thing, like Phil DeFranco.
But is Candace Owens bigger than Phil DeFranco?
Huge, of course.
So how is he boosting her content?
No. I'm saying with his platform, with all of these big Democrat influencers, because they're sort of just ceding all of pop culture to the right. So they're not even discussing these things. They think that they're too good to even be talking about it. They dismiss it as celebrity gossip.
Right, they're kind of behind the time where the right has come. Yeah.
And so that was my point, is like, hey, you guys, you just lost the election. You had this whole crisis after you lost the election saying, oh, you know, Democrats, where's our Joe Rogan? We need to get in touch with people through regular issues. Well, everyone on the internet is obsessed with this trial. There's a million ways to cover it, a million angles to cover it from. And you guys are not even talking about it. And if you are talking about it, you're talking about it in this dismissive way where you're just like doing a 2-minute segment and throwing up a right-wing influencer's content on screen. Like, that's not how you should talk about it. If you want to talk about it, talk about the manipulation and this effort, or go in detail on the case, give people what they do, a 10-part series on it.
Yeah.
Come to your own conclusions, but at least
because you're saying
because
Phil DeFranco just like did a quick catch up. Like,
yeah, I mean, he just dismissed it as celebrity gossip. And again, I really don't want to like hone in on Phil, because I think I really like him, but like, it's just like, my point was sort of like, he was one of the only few like DNC type like influencer people that I could find that even talked about it.
You know, I actually, so I live in Tennessee now, and I do stand-up, and I performed at the Wilson County, Tennessee Democratic Chili fundraiser.
Okay.
Big get for me. And I'm looking at people, and I'm trying to tell them, everyone in this room needs to create a TikTok and an Instagram. Start talking about anything you want to talk about that you're an expert in or that you have a passion in. Bring politics in later. Build that community up. Meet people there, and then be like, hey, healthcare is weird, right? Like, get into the pig pen where all of this is going down. Now, my channel started as Bachelor commentary, and then we moved into some other pop culture, and I would always slide in, you know, politics, and I lost a lot of people because I had the Bachelor audience is pretty conservative. They're across the spectrum, but it's a network TV show, so you're going to get that conservative audience, and very triggering to a lot of people, but I kind of just like held my own and talked to them like I talked to my, you know, MAGA family members, like kid gloves. We want to dunk on everyone, but it doesn't get us anywhere, and that brings us to our conversation today, right? We could have dunked on each other. You actually dunked on me in a funny way. I was like, hey,
I was putting together my article. I was like, I don't have enough images in my article. Let me go on YouTube and see some people that have talked about it just to like show an example of coverage. I don't even think I put a caption. I just like put a screenshot in, and then everyone was like, oh my God, did you see you're on YouTube? You're getting canceled on YouTube. And my friends watch your channel.
I'm the most anti-cancel culture.
My friends watch your channel, and then they were like, he's coming for you and Caroline Kwan. And I was like, well...
Caroline? No, I don't know. I couldn't spot her in the lineup.
You just mentioned... Well, because I had quoted her in the piece. And Caroline, by the way, Caroline's an amazing... Like, she's a leftist Twitch streamer, but she's really great, and I think she has a lot of, like... She's talked a lot about this, like, pop culture capture and how like, we're familiar with the right-wing pipeline for men.
She's like, where's the progressive? And I'm like, hello, I'm here, but I understand you guys don't know me.
You're not, like, doing brand deals with the DNC last... Like, or at least I didn't see you...
No,
like,
I don't take any political
That's what I
money.
mean. Like, I don't consider you as like expressly political. I would consider you along the lines of like pop apologists. Shout out pop apologists. I just went on their podcast. I love them. But
boy,
like,
they ghosted me this week. Where are you?
Oh.
They reached out to me to do an interview.
Oh my God.
Hit me back. No, they're fine.
Well, but you know, they've been covering it or whatever. I don't like I have a different take on the case than they do. But like they're not like expressly political. I would put them more in like the pop culture world, where they're not talking about the politics of it as much. They're really coming at it, again, like the way that like tabloid, like pop culture coverage. And I do think, by the way, people that do that coverage, I would love for them to talk about the political implications more. Like,
I guess the question is this though. If you're, okay, so a lot of my audience is women, and I am gonna make an assumption that women who have sons and boys are thinking differently about this, because it's the first time they're looking at, could my son be accused of something when he wasn't doing something? And again, I don't think these outright accusations happen all the time, but like with Blake's thing, it's really nuanced when you get into he's directing himself and all of that aspect. And I'll just say this, because I don't want to dive into Amber Heard, but she lied about donating to the ACLU, and Blake lied about some of her claims. And people can't get past, why lie? Why fudge?
What did the men lie about? The men lied about tons of other stuff too. And I'm not saying, I think all these
But she's the one who accused him, so he's the one getting canceled, like his life and his wife.
I think like, listen, I think there's a lot to say about this case. I also think that so much of this case reveals power dynamics in Hollywood. And I mean, I was talking to the editor of a big Hollywood publication the other day, and he was like, you know, my takeaway from all of this is like, Justin is a rookie. Because here's the thing, if Blake wants to take control of a movie, like that happens in Hollywood, and if someone's more powerful, honestly, you suck it up and then you direct the next Ryan Reynolds movie or whatever. Like, there's all of these weird sort of like subtle power plays in Hollywood. And I do think that what's interesting about this case is you're getting like a view into some of those, and the public gets to weigh in on some of those. But
if you're like an actor, you suck it up. But he like owns the rights to it.
Sure, well, I think a lot of people suck it up. I think Hollywood is like, there's tons of...
I don't disagree. I think there's not much spying that happens.
Negotiations and stuff. But I think, I mean, here's my thing with the coverage of the case, is that there are ways to cover the case that make it clear that we should still believe women, and also that, like, you know, that don't feed into like misogynistic tropes. Like, so much of, and this is what I put about in my like YouTube video on this topic, is like so many people that make content about this, they have like the, you know, the thumbnails where Blake has the horns and she's in flames.
And Amber Heard got it really bad with TikTok.
You know, and it's just like, again, like, you're not covering it through a neutral lens. You're then, at that point, you're just like sort of grifting off a hate campaign, and you're getting boosted by
easy clicks,
misogynistic hate. And so like, like, I don't think that that's a responsible thing to do. And that's more like the body language expert people, or like, I don't know, there's all these
But isn't there a bias where like TikTokers go crazy?
Yeah.
What I do is like much longer, like I can't sleep at night if I'm going crazy like that.
Yeah.
So you'll always find people that send you death threats or do crazy stuff. You'll always find like poor Stephanie McNeil, or she's dealing with it from Glamour magazine, where other people are coming after her. Like, I can't control them, right?
Yeah.
But like, you're not trying to inflame that, but you still have to try to get someone to click on your video to share your point.
And by the way, we're all guilty of it to an extent, right? Like, I'm sure I've published things that, again, I worked for one of these tabloid magazines. Like, you
toe the line. You go as far as you can go to get clicks.
And I'm sure I've like messed up in the past. And I'm not trying to cancel people that maybe did feed into that a little bit. All I want is that for people to sort of just zoom out a little bit and look at these dynamics and talk about them a little bit more. And if you do consider yourself to be on the left, or you are a little bit nervous about like Harvey Weinstein getting rehabilitated and what that might mean for, women who want to come forward about wrongdoing, let's like have those conversations.
Sure. And like my wife worked in entertainment before we moved and had the baby, and I had to deal with skeezy photographers, and like I know how people, when they get a little power, can be monsters. Actually, my childhood friend was Harvey Weinstein's assistant, and like they're all, who knows, right? Who knows? But so just to go back, you borrow my thumbnail. I really don't care about it, other than like I wasn't trying to like say that, like, I think you or like your fans were like, oh, she's putting. It's because I didn't put a caption on it, and I just was lazy again. And I'm not a Phil DeFranco, so like I don't have that sort of equity where like.
No, I know, and I should have like said, here's just an example of like some coverage on the internet or something.
Sure.
I don't know.
But I am a white guy, so what you don't understand,
I get
and again, trust me, I don't understand a lot of what you must have to go through, but what I have to go through is I gotta tiptoe this line so that Child Protective Services doesn't come to my house.
No,
it's fucking insane. I got pulled over by the cops the other day. I was just speeding, local neighborhood stuff, 40 and a 30, and I'm like, hey, I run a YouTube channel nearby. I'm on the list, right? I had to make sure I'm on the list, so that when the cops do get called, because I know you've dealt with stalkers, so like. It's like dangerous when you're calling balls and strikes online to be like, just so you know, that's not what I represent.
Totally. And I'm so glad that this is the beauty also of everyone having their own platform, because you can like respond and you can be like, hey, that's not me. Just to be clear, I don't associate with that and whatever.
Yeah, it's not a knockout punch. And I said, let's play fair. And then you respond sharing the screen grab of me calling you a wacko. And I'm like, you got me. Like
it's fine. It's the internet. I don't care.
I laughed about that. I was like, all right, time to chat.
And I have friends that have like, I have friends that are super pro Johnny and will die on this hill. And like, I don't agree with them on that. My feeling about the Blake stuff is that like, listen, I've done my own reporting on it. I'm hoping to do more stories on it. I think, and also having been subject to like defamation lawsuits myself and like sort of seen the way that things can come out in the media, like I think that there's a lot of red flags like with this case where I'm like, I just want to wait for more before I like declare something. But in the meantime, what I do see is this like hate machine weaponized against Blake. And I think we should talk about that. Even if you think that she's guilty as hell and she's evil or whatever, you can still recognize that there are a bunch of far-right grifters using this case as an opportunity to grow their audience.
And look, I relate it to like these Venezuelan gang members. If they are gang members and you are deporting them, show the work, show the evidence, like prove that this is actually happening. I wish we could live in a vacuum where we just pause it on Blake and no one's mean to her until you figure it out.
No, but that's not the world. People want to like speculate. People want to dig things up. I just think it's like Megyn Kelly's CPAC talk was a good example of this. Like, she's not teasing it out. She's not talking about it from I have my own perspective from XYZ. She's like, you entitled little, whatever. You thought this was 2017 Me Too, and it's not. We don't believe you anymore.
Yeah, she goes hard. They go hard,
Guys, like also, let's think about those implications.
When in fact she was a part of being Me Too'd essentially by Roger Ailes at Fox News. And
we want a world where women can come forward and aren't going to be targeted in smear campaigns.
I guess the question is this: how can someone come forward? And again, this is obviously like the very specific examples, because 99% of the time, like this happens to pro athletes, and when it happens, there's a big power thing. There's crazy people online. It happened a couple times this year in the NFL. Like, that's where it usually happens.
Yeah.
This case is different because it's like, you know, you want to see the proof, but at the same time, while you don't want to come after her, but her initial claims publicly, I almost lost you there.
Well, this is the thing. And also this is the strategy that is used in Gamergate, where it's like, it's this famous Steve Bannon fled the zone strategy, where it's like, we're not going to wait. Like, the one side is going to be relatively quiet, maybe do like one or two, you know, do their New York Times story or whatever, but like, they're not going to like release a website of stuff or be posting 24/7 or have their lawyer out on YouTube channels. Like,
but that's kind of like a desperation move to be like, here's my playbook. I've been called out. You look at it all yourself.
That is right. And that is something that I've had done to me as well. And the thing is that you can't easily refute that, because what it requires is a lot of context and nuance that people don't see, which is, again, why we have our legal system. But these people don't want to fight these people. You know, they don't want to fight these cases in the legal system. They want to fight the cases in the court of public opinion, because they know that the odds are stacked in their favor. And I think that that's a problem. I do. I just think that it doesn't necessarily...
I think you're generally right, except that she frames it as workplace issue, which it kind of is, but she's the one who's making 10x the money. She's the one who can dangle Taylor Swift. Like, if they don't get Taylor Swift song...
I honestly, like, this is one of those things where it's like, I just want to see it play out, and I want them to go to court, and I want to have their day in court. And I think, look, it's raised a lot of like interesting discussions about power dynamics in Hollywood, and you know, I think there's so much to talk about here, and I think you can speculate and you can go down that rabbit hole. I'm just saying that, like, if you are a leftist or liberal and you are going down that rabbit hole, to sort of acknowledge this like machine that's being weaponized against her and educate your audience on it, because a lot of them don't know that even exists, and so they're watching some of this content and they're going down the rabbit hole.
So you think it's more astroturf, like that's how a lot of this hate kind of campaign began?
I don't know if it began as astroturf. I think it just began as these right-wing opportunists recognizing that pop culture, the more they cover these pop culture cases, the more audience they can grow and convert to their content. And people love it. I mean, this is why like snark communities are huge. People love to like, a lot of these women, you know, people would love to hate on them, right?
Snark communities are crazy.
They're crazy.
They're absolutely undiagnosed mental health issues.
But they're mostly women tearing down women.
I agree.
Privileged women. And so people love to tear down privileged women.
Look, we go to the sporting matches, you go to a football game, you'll see dudes fist fighting in the stands over a spilt beer.
Yeah.
And then women will do snark pages. I don't know the psychology, but I completely agree with you. Now look, so we're kind of just leaning on different sides of the fence. I have space to completely turn on my current opinion, and I actually want to practice that, almost like showing the math to my audience, to say, give me some evidence, screen grabs, anything whatsoever, that, you know, will change my opinion. But again, it's going to play out in court.
It's going to play out in court, and I do think what's concerning now, especially as a reporter, is trying to get people on the record who know about this case, who want to talk about it and maybe provide additional context, who are terrorized because they don't want to be smeared and targeted next in the smear campaign.
Do you think that's why no one's speaking on her behalf?
I will tell you, as a journalist, there's a lot of people that will not go on the record anymore because they think that they're going to be targeted in YouTube video. They don't want to do that.
But you also get targeted if you know something and don't share it.
But they're not targeted now. I think they're much more targeted if they're putting themselves out there, and I totally get it.
We saw Blake, and I do want to move on. We'll move on in a second. No, because I do respect this convo. But we saw Blake kind of throwing that first public punch, and everyone was like, F that guy. And then, and I thought it was a good example of people exercising their critical thinking, where they read his response, and nearly every one of her complaints, there was a reasonable response with evidence, screen grabs, and I don't necessarily know who to blame, but there are different conspiracy theories. I just think Candace Owens gets she's drinking out of the same tap as I am. It's Reddit threads. I'll share a crazy conspiracy, but then I'll give my commentary, and it's kind of like my control burn of it. Here's where it is.
Your commentary isn't going to be, that's why we should dismantle MeToo, and that's why all women are liars. And that's the problem, is that I think But
what do you do? So I guess it comes down to, what do we do? I think you're progressive, right?
Yeah, certainly not right way.
So what do we do? What do we do to agree on?
I just think that if regular pop culture people could work more, could educate people more on the weaponization. And instead of being like, wow, I'm so shocked, I agree with Candace Owens, be like, okay, it's interesting that I agree with Candace Owens on this. Why is Candace Owens taking this position? Well, how is she, or not, and I hate, I'm not singling out Candace, but like, she's a master at what she does. But like, like, just recognize that there is this ecosystem on the right that is coordinated, that is intentional about driving hate campaigns against women, and educate your audience on it so that when they start watching their content, that they don't fall down that rabbit hole.
What do you think is their motivation? Do you think it's because I talked to my wife about this, and she's kind of like, I don't want to look two-dimensionally, like left versus right.
Yeah.
She's a woman who's a progressive, but like she sees the world as someone who has to look over her shoulder when she walks down the alley.
Yeah.
I'm a guy who just could man-spread until people told me it was wrong. Like, I'm like an idiot, you know what I mean?
And I'm also, by the way, I don't identify with either political party. Like, I do consider myself more nonpartisan. Like, I criticize the Democrats all the time. I do believe in, like, women's rights. And as somebody that's written so much since the days of Gamergate, because so windy, about, like, the way the internet is weaponized for hate campaigns, I think it's worth... Yeah, I just want more people to be talking about that aspect of it.
Yeah, so you bring up, like, it's like Democrat, Republican. We're all forced into this, like, duality, right? And I'm kind of like you, where I don't want to be shamed for like having an opinion that you got to get rid of Biden and you got to do a proper like primary, like, because I can see from a mile away how that's going to be used against you. And then it's no like surprise that the Democratic Party is pretty much polling at the lowest.
Inept.
And they've got like
part of my story. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
They're inept. They're so dumb. They're so out of touch.
And you feel stuck in it. We're elder millennials, but you feel stuck on the 75-year-olds with cancer that are leading the party. God bless them. Go take a day off. Give this to someone younger. Who has like an idea of maybe, like, for instance, Tim Walz was advised not to tone it down.
I know.
Because Kamala wasn't ready for it. She didn't necessarily go on the Joe Rogan. And you brought up that the left needs a Joe Rogan, but you have to admit that the left had Joe Rogan.
Well, I know exactly. That's exactly what I said in my original piece, which I linked to. I don't know if you read that, but I wrote a piece. Actually, it's called "Why the Democrats Will Never Have like a Joe Rogan" or something like that. It's basically like they literally had that. Let's not forget how they like crucified Bernie for going on.
I was going to bring that same thing up.
It's insane, but this just goes back to my the thesis that I was trying to make of that article, or the point that I was trying to make that I think got lost because I was like, people wanted to litigate the case, and I get it. Is like, the Democrats are so inept, and they had this whole election where it was so clear that they're so incredibly out of step with culture. And here's, I would argue, one of the biggest pop culture stories happening, and they're nowhere to be found on it. They're not even talking about it. And of course, you have the pop culture reporters, like, or people like yourself that are like commentators, and they're going to cover it, but they're probably not going to cover it through a political lens, because that's not really what the goal is, right? And they're just abdicating culture. But the people on the right, they recognize the power of pop culture, and they cover pop culture really well.
I guess I really don't see the culture issue, and you could totally say this is a privilege I have, because I'm just looking at it trying to call balls and strikes.
Yeah.
So I see Blake versus Justin.
Yeah.
But I understand you're a woman, you're looking at it from a different lens, and I have to, like, I was, coming into this conversation thinking, all right, like, don't, be open to what Taylor has to say about your experience of how this could wash out a MeToo movement. And my experience, by kind of like trying to be as critical as possible, you're strengthening believing other people's stories.
So that's what every person claims when they're trying to get, when Harvey Weinstein was, when originally these women came forward, the whole argument was like, we have to discredit these women so that the real victims can come forward. And what you start to notice about this far-right movement is that there are no real victims. There's never a situation where they will believe the woman. And so, again, like, you're not operating in that mindset, but a lot of people making content about this case, or Amber Heard, or other people, Me Too, they are operating in that mindset. And so I just want people to be aware of that, and to be aware of this sort of machine that they've built on the right, and use more media literacy. That's it. And I know people are going to hate, like, it's like the fervor that people have, especially women, where they're like so angry and they're so like, I don't know. It's bizarre, but it's like and I saw this with Gamergate too, where it was like, these women need to have their lives destroyed because that's the only way that real victims will want to come forward. It's like, do you think that publicly destroying a woman's reputation and terrorizing her and making nonstop content about how evil she is, do you think that actually makes these real victims want to come forward? No.
Yeah, you see someone like flogged in the public space and
yes.
You go, and I totally, look, and again, on a less pop culture level and more like actual change, like I'm a big believer in re-educating, cops on how to deal with victims when they come forward.
Yeah.
I mean, we still live in this world where like rape kits don't get tested, and
yeah.
I'm all about like changing the whole system. I just think that when you look at Justin as a dad to kids and his wife, and you just see that like he deserves the benefit of the doubt as much as she does. But I understand there is a bias though when you see the crazy people online. Like the pendulum always swings too far.
Yes.
And and that's why I get accused of being like a pro-Blake person. I'm like, I'm not pro either one of them.
Yeah.
I just want whoever is innocent in this thing to like come out of it alive.
Totally. And I think like you can be a pop culture lover, you can cover it nonstop, you can examine these things, you can cover the ups and downs in the case. All I'm saying is like, and I'm not trying to cancel anybody that I disagree with or whatever, like I'm just saying like, just recognize that there is this entire infrastructure on the right aimed at destroying and discrediting women, and we should try our best to like educate the audience about that and educate people about that. And also people should have media literacy where they recognize it, and unfortunately a lot of them don't recognize it.
I believe in media literacy. I mean, you're not going to be able to convince people that the Democratic Party or the Republican Party is the right party. You have to convince them like what's the right thing based on like, here's a war breaking out, follow the truth to it, look at multiple sources.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that you get misinterpreted more in your written work versus like, because you're coming off reasonable. We don't agree on everything, but like you said, I think we're like, we would do fine at a dinner party together, right? We're not going to be at each other's throats.
I disagree with it. I mean, I think it's fine to disagree. Like I feel like I write and say what I believe, but I think it speaks to the level of sort of, when somebody comes at you and they're attacking you so hard, because especially like I dealt with this a lot with like the Amber stuff, where it's like, these people are so dogmatic about being anti-Amber that they can't even, they're like rabid, like they're livid at any woman that would bother to take the other side. And I think that speaks poorly on them. Because it's like, you're not, okay, so I don't believe that you are coming from a place of like facts or reason or whatever. I think you're coming from a place of emotion, and you're so wrapped up in this case that you want to tear this woman down, and you're so angry about it. I don't know. I find it difficult to deal with some of those people.
I regurgitate this all the time. I say, I think everyone's trying their best with the info they have. I don't know Candace's background completely. I know she dealt with some stuff in high school that was like, people get like the Kyle Rittenhouse is you go down a wrong path, and next thing you know, you go from like the Covington Catholic kid to you're on Tucker Carlson. And I see the Covington Catholic kid with the MAGA hat. I have a brother who's 18 years younger than me. I see my younger brother and I go, these 17-year-olds, they don't know what they stand for.
Totally.
I didn't know. I was in college studying abroad in France during the Iraq War, trying to tell people that Lance Armstrong was innocent and George Bush was trying to do what's best for our country. And they're looking at me like they're 5 years ahead, and they're going, what are you talking about? But like, that's what I had. That's what I had access to. My family that is from the South, they were taught state rights. Like you do need space to sort of come to.
But I think that's actually what most people want. Like, I think most people are sick of the like left versus right narrative, and I think people are sick of the like Democrat and Republican, and we hate the other side, and I do think that people.
So do you think people got triggered when you brought that side of politics into it?
Yes, I think it made people immediately have this visceral, angry reaction where they were like, well, I think Blake Lively is lying and evil, and does that mean I'm conservative? And it's like, no, that just means that you have this view and that you're potentially susceptible to falling down this rabbit hole. So maybe exercise a little like restraint, before you go down that rabbit hole, and think about what this ideology is. Like, if you take that ideology to its natural conclusion, kind of like what that means. That's all I'm saying.
And my point that I was not good at making, this is why I immediately took this off Twitter, because I was like, I don't do Twitter, you'll dunk on me, you're going to win, like, this isn't me, I don't do this, I don't make money on it. Like, if I don't make money, I don't do it. But I go, well, I really do feel like I've lost a lot of my smart decent comedian friends to like this libertarian or right-leaning free speech
Yeah.
thing, because it is a horseshoe model where the ultra far left and the far right kind of want to cancel and censor each other. They're like in this battle of canceling each other, and then more reasonable people, like literally 90%, don't want that. They just want like learn and do better.
Well, also most people, I think a lot of people at least, I shouldn't say most, but like they want to feel a type of way of something, and they really just want sort of like moral justification for feeling that way. So it's like, I believe XYZ, you know, I don't know, you have some belief system, or maybe if you feel a certain way about Amber or Blake or whatever, and you want to feel like, it's not just to be like, you know what, I disagree with that person on that issue. They're overwhelmingly fine. We disagree on this. Maybe we can have a debate about it, whatever. It's like, I have to, like, morally, I hate this person, and I'm going to sort of like use this. I'm not making myself very clear, but it's like, you want to make this like moral, you have to feel moral for hating someone. You can't just admit that you're a hater, or you can't just admit that you disagree with someone. You have to feel morally justified in disagreeing with them and morally justified in hating them. And I just think a lot of us would be happier if we're like, you know what, we're just going to disagree on this issue. Maybe we have different perspectives. Maybe we have different backgrounds. Maybe we consume different media about this thing. But
look, I mean, I've had family go, and a lot of people went straight Bernie to Trump, and like you gotta like know that happens to address why it happened.
Yeah.
And those same people that went in Trump, a lot of them stayed on AOC. So it's like the left has a recipe. They just need to dismantle the sort of like corporatized thing and like show and like put someone up that hasn't been bought in the past. Like Tim Walz is like, look, say what you want about him, but he's like, I don't have any stocks. I got a teacher's pension or whatever. And it's like that you almost need that pedigree to fight that next fight. Like I lived here, I talk about all this middle class stuff. My mom was on food stamps. My mom, like her family business took a PPP loan. Like they believed in all of the social fabric to help people out. And yet right now they wouldn't vote in that direction. Like they've lost it because they saw a Democratic Party that was lying to them. And you might say it's not fair. Trump's the biggest con man in the world.
But the Democrats lie all the time. And the Democrats lie and don't admit that they lie. And then they say, suck it up, you have to vote for us no matter what.
Especially, and it's like, I get that when you get to the general election. I get that, like, there's something else that's worse. But even in the primaries, they started using that same thing.
We didn't even have a primary this time around.
And say what you want about RFK Jr., but does he go to the right if he loses in a primary? Like, give him again, I don't support anything he's got because I think he's crazy. But like, air that out so people can see it.
Yes.
That way they can't come to their own conclusions, which will lead to the bias they're trying to.
And I think that's the problem. And like what I think is, you're asking me before, like my work is misinterpreted. Like, I do think that there is a certain group of people online that wants to portray me in a certain way. And you know, it's like I write this story, I make a video, whatever. I'm like, okay, here's what I think. I don't know. I read it in like 3 hours. I'm like, I hope it's coherent. Clearly not.
You didn't have time to credit me. It's
whatever.
Fine.
You know, I'm like just getting it out there. But you know, and then I'm getting like some lady on Instagram, you know, tagging me, boosting these right-wing conspiracies about me, saying, oh my God, she's been fired from Vox Media, a company I've never worked for. She got kicked out of Columbia Journalism School, a school I never got into and never went to journalism school. But it's like all of these weird things, like where then they suddenly like they have to go so reactionary, and it's like, no, just be like, okay, like interesting piece, I disagree with this, or you really kind of missed the nuance on this, or like whatever.
Do you think the internet is just going to be that way?
Yeah,
like,
and I'm guilty of it too. So
no, we treat it like it's like us yelling at each other, and it's not. It's someone sitting on their toilet somewhere, taking like mischaracterizing the worst. Yeah. Because I see you, like you want me too. You want people to be believed and everything, and I'm on that same side. Absolutely, I just didn't see it through that general.
Well, I think
cultural.
you're covering it, and I put your picture in it, so you're like feeling like, what the fuck is this about me? And my point,
you're gonna regret ever doing that.
Like, my point of that piece is more just like, hey, Democrats, you know, you guys talked all this game about pop culture, so like, why don't you actually engage?
Yeah, well, we engaged.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so fun.
How can people follow you, your Substack?
Yeah, my Substack is usermag.co. I did just get the .com, so it's changing soon, but usermag. And I'm on YouTube also.
I will credit your YouTube in the description here. No, I really appreciate it. I'm not the type to ever want to like own someone. Like the greater conversation is better than like the quick victory of thinking you dunked on someone. So good chat. And any other stories that come up that you think deserve my opinion, or
I would
vice
love
versa?
to hear it. No, I'd love to keep in touch. I love covering pop culture and the internet, and I would love to hear from people too about their thoughts on stuff.
I thought you were ghosting me. I thought you weren't going to show up.
No.
And this was a big like slam on Dave. I'll meet you at the park. And I was like, oh, she got me. Dang, I bought her a water.
What is that? Meet me in Temecula?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we tried. Well, thanks again. And all right,
thanks for
go
having
support her if you enjoy what she's doing, or if you don't, just be kind, because we're all entitled to our
You can
thoughts,
yell
right?
at me in the comments. It'll boost my videos.
Yeah, there you go. All right.